My name is Hayden Forsyth, and I live in a big house that has gotten too spacious since Evelyn died. 73 years is too old to start over, but too young to just give up and die, especially when your only son looks at you like he's counting down the days until your funeral. Seattle mornings start with rain as usual. I sit at the panoramic window of my house on Queen Anne Hill overlooking Elliott Bay. Evelyn always said the view was worth every penny spent. Once upon a time, I agreed with her. Now I look out at the gray watery surface and feel nothing but a dull ache in my joints from the humidity. Evelyn and I have a simple story. Fell in love in college, got married, built a pharmaceutical company from scratch, had a son. All the usual. Life is life with its ups and downs. 20 years ago, cancer took her quickly and ruthlessly. It's ironic, a lifetime of making drugs and dying from a disease those drugs couldn't cure. With Cordell, it was just the two of us, and that was the beginning of the end. He's never told me directly, but I know. He blames me for not saving his mother, that I was too busy with the company to notice the first symptoms. Maybe he's right. I was too busy creating what should have been his legacy. My phone vibrates on the desk. Another call from Patrick, my financial advisor. Probably wants to discuss investments or philanthropy again. I've never understood this new fashion of giving away money left and right just because you're about to die. I've earned every dime I've got, and I'm not going to give it up. I ignore the call and open my tablet. It's the only thing that keeps me connected to the outside world lately. I look at the news, the stock price, out of habit, even though I sold the company 5 years ago and resigned from the board of directors. Then I automatically go to Cordell's social networking page. My son is 15 years younger than me, but sometimes I think we're from different eras. I built businesses, he built a digital footprint. I created jobs, he's algorithms. I produced medicines, he's content. Although Cordell had a medical degree, the best my capital could buy, he chose to develop medical apps over practicing medicine. He works at some fancy digital health transformation firm. Every time he utters that phrase, I can barely contain myself from rolling my eyes. So I'm flipping through his newsfeed, and my eye stops on a photo. Cordell and some woman are standing in front of the Space Needle, and she's holding out her hand with a ring to the camera. The caption reads, "She said yes, starting a new chapter with my beautiful Celeste." I reread the post several times trying to realize. My son Cordell Hayden Forsyth, my only child and heir, has decided to get married, and I find out about it from the internet as some random subscriber. My first feeling was resentment, then anger, then curiosity. Who is this Celeste? I've never heard of her. Although, to be honest, Cordell and I haven't had a decent conversation in, a year? 2? After our last fight over me criticizing his new project, contact was limited to formal calls on Christmas and my birthday. I'm clicking on this woman's profile, Celeste Murphy, 35 years old, sports analyst for a channel I'd never heard of. Judging by the photos, she's beautiful, ambitious, and loves to show off her life in public. In the last year, lots of pictures with my son that I didn't even know existed. I am filled with bitterness. No, not because he found someone. I'm happy for him. I really am. But what hurts me is that he didn't even see fit to call me, to tell me in person. I'm his father, damn it. I gave him a life, an education, opportunities. I created a future for him. I put down my tablet and walk over to the bar. I pour myself a whiskey, an expensive single malt. Evelyn never approved of morning alcohol, but Evelyn's gone. And old age and loneliness are reason enough to break the rules. Was I a bad father? I was strict, it's true, demanding, insisted on discipline and results. But I did it out of love, out of a desire to raise him into a real man, ready for a tough world. I didn't want him to become one of those spoiled rich kids who burn through their parents' money and don't know the value of hard work. Perhaps I was overreacting. Perhaps in an effort not to spoil him, I robbed him of his warmth. Perhaps in trying to make him strong, I made him cold. I remember him crying when I pulled him off the soccer team in high school because his grades had dropped. "But I love soccer, Daddy," he shouted through his tears. "Love doesn't pay the bills," I replied then. In this world, knowledge and achievement are respected, not athletic talent. And he listened, as he always did. Quit sports, went back to books. got into medical school like I wanted, or maybe it's because after Evelyn died, I got caught up in my work. Cordell was 15 at the time, a difficult age. He needed me, and I was too busy to notice. The company was in crisis, and I was working 18 hours a day to save what would one day go to him. I thought I was doing it for him, but maybe I was just hiding from my own grief. I take another sip of whiskey and walk over to the wall of photos. My wedding to Evelyn, Cordell the baby, Cordell the senior. The family portrait, the last one, where we're all together, a month before Evelyn started coughing up blood. Taking this picture in my hands, we look like the perfect family. Who would have thought that in just a year there would be nothing left of that happiness? The landline phone rings. Cordell's name comes up on the caller ID. Finally remembered I exist. I put the frame back in place and hesitate before picking up the phone. I want him to wait, to feel my pause. A little revenge for not telling me about the engagement in person. Hayden Forsyth, I say in a formal tone. Dad, it's me. Cordell's voice sounds unsure. How are you? Fine, I answer dryly. Congratulations on your engagement. Social media works wonders, doesn't it? Even relatives get family news. There's silence on the other end of the line. Then a sigh. I've been meaning to call you, he finally says. Of course you were, I grin. Apparently, after letting the whole world know. Look, I know I should have. No, I interrupt him. You don't owe me anything. Obviously, I'm just the father who raised you, educated you, built the business that will secure your future. That's exactly why I didn't call right away. His voice is rising. You always do this. It's all about money, about what you've done for me, about your expectations. What do you expect? Gratitude? I ask and immediately regret my words. That's not what I wanted to say. I wanted to say that I feel betrayed, rejected, that I'm hurt that he didn't see fit to share the big news with me. But as always, pride trumps honesty. No, Dad, I don't expect anything from you, he said with a tired tone. Celeste and I want to have a little engagement party this weekend. I just thought you should know. Am I invited? I ask, though the tone of my voice immediately indicates that I doubt it. Of course, he replies, but I can hear the insincerity. Saturday, 7 o'clock, at Canlis. I'll be there, I say and add. And I'd like to meet your fiancé before then. Maybe you could come over for dinner on Friday? There's a pause again. I can practically hear him mentally searching for an excuse to say no. Celeste is really busy at work. Tell her that her future father-in-law really wants to meet her, I insist, and that I have certain financial plans for your wedding. Financial plans for your wedding. That always works. The mention of money. It may be cruel and manipulative, but what can I do? I can't just say, son, I miss you. Let's fix our relationship. Cordell will laugh at me, or worse, think I'm out of my mind. Okay, he gives up. I'll ask her. I'll call you to confirm. I look forward to it, I say and hang up. I return to the window with my glass in my hand. The rain has stopped, but the sky is still cloudy. Classic Seattle. 28 years in this city, and I still haven't gotten used to its fickle moods, nor my son's mood swings. I should find out more about this Celeste. I'm opening up my laptop looking for information. Education, Arizona State University, journalism degree, career, started at small sports publications, then moved to television, specialized in basketball and baseball. She ended up in Seattle 3 years ago when she received an offer from a local sports channel. Apparently, she's building a successful career. Well, at least she's not a money chaser with no education or ambition. Not that I'm worried about my money. I have enough lawyers to protect a fortune. But I've always wanted a woman of his caliber for Cordell, someone suitable. In that sense, Celeste didn't seem like a bad option. But why would he keep her from me? We didn't communicate closely, it was true, but not to the point where he'd cut me out of his life completely. At least that's what I thought, closing my laptop and rubbing my temples. Perhaps I really was too demanding a father. Maybe I was pushing him too hard, expecting him to follow in my footsteps. But everything I did was out of love, even if he doesn't realize it. Tomorrow I'll see them both, and we'll start over. I'll be polite, friendly. I won't criticize his decisions or his career. I'll be the father he wants to be. At least I'll try. Perhaps this wedding is our chance for a new beginning. Friday night came faster than I expected. I had been busy all day preparing for the dinner I had invited Cordell and his fiancée to. I should have hired a chef or had it delivered from a restaurant, but I decided to cook it myself. Evelyn always said that nothing shows care like a self-cooked meal. Perhaps this was my last chance to show my son that behind the strictness and demandingness, there was always love. I chose roast beef, a dish Cordell had loved as a child when we were still a family. Evelyn made it on Sundays, and it was a family ritual. Mashed potatoes, roasted asparagus, homemade gravy, and the expensive red wine I saved for special occasions. Meeting my future daughter-in-law for the first time certainly fit that definition. I set the table in the dining room, which I hardly ever use. I usually eat in the kitchen or in my office when I'm working, but today has to be special. I pull out the finest china, silverware, crystal glasses, everything Evelyn and I picked out together years ago. It's impeccable, as it should be in a Forsyte home. At 6:30, the doorbell rings. They're early, which is a good sign. It means they're anxious to meet me, or more likely, they're anxious to get this evening over with. I open the door and see them. Cordell looks tense, but that's nothing new. Every time he's near me, he seems to freeze, as if he's waiting to be criticized or attacked. Celeste, well, she's even more attractive in real life than she is in pictures. Tall, slender, with dark hair and an elegant bun, a confident look, a firm handshake. Expensive, but not flashy. She seems to have good taste. "Welcome," I say, trying to sound warm and sincere. "Please come in." "Hi, Daddy." Cordell steps forward and hugs me awkwardly. I can feel his shoulders tense. "Mr. Forsythe," Celeste holds out her hand. "I've heard so much about you. It's nice to finally meet you." I shake her hand, noting the cool touch. She's nervous too, though she hides it better than my son. "Celeste," I smile. "You can call me Hayden. After all, we'll be family soon." I notice Cordell flinch at the word family. "Yes, my boy," I thought. "We're still family whether you want us to be or not." I walk them into the living room. Celeste looks around, not hiding her impression of the furnishings. "You have a beautiful home," she says. "The view of the bay. It's amazing." "Thank you," I say. "My wife and I bought this house 30 years ago. It was the first thing we bought when the company started making a real profit." "Yeah, Cordell told me about your company." Celeste nods. "Impressive success story. To build a business like that from scratch is quite an accomplishment." I glance at my son, who looks like he'd rather be anywhere but here. I wonder exactly what he told me about my business. Probably mentioned how much time I spent at work instead of being with him, or how I insisted he study pharmacy instead of wasting time on his digital hobbies. "What are you drinking?" I ask. "Wine? Whiskey?" "Wine would be great," Celeste replies. "Me too," Cordell added. I pour everyone a glass of wine and make a toast. "To your engagement. I wish you a long and happy life together." We drink, and for a moment there is an awkward silence. Cordell is the first to break it. "What did you make for dinner, Daddy? Smells good." "Roast beef," I answer. "Your favorite. Remember how Mom used to make it every Sunday?" His face softens at the mention of Evelyn. "I do," he says quietly. "I miss those times." "I do too, son. Me too." For a moment there is a connection between us, fragile but real. The memory of Evelyn was always the thing that brought us together, even when everything else separated us. "Cordell said you wanted to discuss the wedding," Celeste interjected, breaking the moment. "We already have some plans and ideas. She's clearly a businesswoman, used to specifics." "Well, that's a quality I respect." "Yes, of course," I point toward the dining room. "Let's discuss it over dinner. Everything's ready." We move to the table and I begin to set the food. The roast beef turned out just the way Evelyn had prepared it, juicy on the inside, crispy on the outside. I noticed Cordell's eyes widen at the sight of the familiar dish, but Celeste only smiled politely. Perhaps she preferred a more modern, fancy cuisine, or vegetarian. Hell, I didn't even think to ask about her food preferences. "So," I begin as we start eating, "tell me about your wedding plans." Celeste perks up. "We're thinking about a small ceremony at the Ravenna Country Club. About 50 guests, mostly close friends and family. I've always dreamed of a garden wedding, with flowers and candles everywhere." I nod, noting that Cordell is letting her do the talking. He's always been like that, preferring to stay in the shadows while someone more assertive made the decisions. When I was a kid, it was Evelyn, then it was me, and now apparently it's Celeste. Sounds nice, I said. And when are you planning this event? Next month, Celeste replies. On the 10th. We want to get it done before the rainy season starts. That soon? I don't hide my surprise. It usually takes longer to get ready for a wedding. We don't see the point in putting it off, she shrugs. Besides, we're both busy people. If we put it off, it could be a year before we find the right date. I understand, I nod, though I don't really understand. In my day, an engagement took at least 6 months, and wedding planning was a serious endeavor that took time and planning. But it's their life, their decision. And the honeymoon? I ask, moving on to the main part of my plan. Have you decided where you're going? Cordell and Celeste exchange glances. Honestly, Cordell begins, we haven't decided yet. We'll probably just take a couple days and go somewhere close by. We both have a lot of work, and it's hard to make time for a long trip. This is my chance. That's unacceptable, I say, cutting off a piece of meat. The honeymoon is an important part of starting a family. It's a time for the two of you to be together, without the worries and problems of the outside world. I pause, watching their reactions. Cordell looks wary, Celeste looks intrigued. I want to give you a wedding present, I continue. Let me arrange a honeymoon for you. It's all paid for, all planned. All you have to do is show up at the airport. Dad, that's too generous, Cordell starts to say, but I interrupt him. Nothing is too generous for my only son and his chosen one. I smile at Celeste. I thought about a private bungalow in the Maldives. 2 weeks of absolute luxury and privacy. White beaches, crystal clear water, personal chef. What do you think? I can see Celeste's eyes light up. Even Cordell looks impressed, though he's trying to hide it. Mr. Forsyth. Hayden, Celeste says. That sounds wonderful, but we can't accept such an expensive gift. You can and you will, I insist. I insist. After all, I only have one son, and he's only getting married once. The last words come out on their own, and I see Cordell tense up. Shit. I didn't mean to sound so patronizing, but the words have been said. We really appreciate the offer, Celeste interjects, obviously trying to smooth things over. But 2 weeks is really too long. I can't leave my job for that long, especially in the middle of sports season. 10 days, I bargain. That's the minimum to really relax and enjoy a vacation. Besides, it's the Maldives. The flight itself takes almost 24 hours. They exchange glances again, having a silent dialogue. I've seen similar between Evelyn and me, the ability to communicate without words, to understand each other with half a glance. No matter how I feel about their hasty decision to marry, the bond between them is real. Okay, Cordell finally agrees. 10 days. And we're very grateful, Dad. His voice sounds sincere, but I see something else in his eyes. Doubt? Suspicion? He doesn't believe in my generosity, thinks there's a trick behind it, and maybe he's right. I don't fully understand my own motives. Do I really want to make them feel good, or is this a way to show my power, my influence on their lives? Fine, I smile. I'll take care of all the arrangements. You won't have to worry about a thing. That's very generous of you, Celeste says. Thank you. She says the words warmly, but I notice that her gaze is evaluative. She's not looking at me as a future father-in-law, but as an asset, as a resource. Or am I just getting paranoid in my old age? The rest of dinner is spent in small talk. Celeste talks about her work, how she met Cordell at a charity event for children's sports. Cordell is mostly silent, occasionally inserting remarks or correcting details in his fiance's story. I watch them, trying to understand their dynamic. He is reserved, thoughtful, a little unsure. She is bright, talkative, determined. In some ways, they resemble Evelyn and me, though I was more like Celeste in temperament and Evelyn more like Cordell. After dessert, apple pie, another of Cordell's childhood favorites. I suggest we move back to the living room for coffee and brandy. Celeste apologizes and goes to the bathroom, leaving my son and me alone. She's a wonderful woman, I say, pouring brandy into 2 glasses. Yes, Cordell replies. She's amazing, smart, talented, driven, and beautiful, I add. You have good taste, son. Your mom would love it. His face softens at the mention of Evelyn. It always works. Do you think so? He asked quietly. I'm sure, I nod. She always wanted happiness for you. We both have. He looks at me questioningly. Dad, why would you want that? He asked me bluntly. The honeymoon, all those expenses. What do you want in return? His bluntness hurts me. Does he really think I'm incapable of a selfless gesture? That my every act is manipulation or calculation? Nothing, I reply. I just want to give you a gift, to help you get your family life off to the right start. You never do anything for nothing, he insists. There's always some purpose, some plan. Maybe my goal is to repair my relationship with you, I say, saying what I really feel for the first time in a long time. Maybe I realize I haven't been the best father, and I want to fix that before it's too late. He looks at me for a long moment, as if he's trying to determine if I'm sincere. I endure the look, even though everything inside me is clenching. Damn, when did we become such strangers to each other? Okay, he finally says. Thanks for the honeymoon. It, it means a lot to us. I nod, feeling like we've reached some sort of fragile truce. Not reconciliation, no. Too much water has passed for that, but perhaps the first step toward it. Celeste returns and the conversation becomes general again. I show them pictures of the Maldives on my tablet, tell them about the resort I've chosen. I promise that all the details of the trip will be taken care of in the next few days. Cordell relaxes a little, even smiles a couple times. Celeste openly marvels at the opportunities I'm giving them. When they leave around 10 p.m., I feel a strange mixture of contentment and emptiness. The evening has gone better than I expected. Celeste seemed to accept me. Cordell was more open than usual. My plan worked. The honeymoon was the perfect way to reconnect with my son and impress his fiancée. But deep inside, a worm of doubt gnaws at me. Do they really appreciate my gesture? Or do they just take it for granted? Do they see behind it a genuine desire to help? Or just an old man trying to buy attention? And there's something else that worries me. Something about Celeste. She seems sincere, but I've lived a long life and I've learned to recognize people. Something in her eyes and her smile. She looks at Cordell not as a woman madly in love with her chosen one, but as a stepping stone to something. Or am I just becoming a suspicious old fool, unable to believe that my son could be loved simply for what he is? Either way, the honeymoon was paid for, and they accepted it. It was my first move in a game whose purpose I myself do not yet fully understand. After our meeting with Cordell and Celeste, a week passed. I was in the process of organizing their honeymoon in the Maldives, as promised. My bank's concierge service took care of all the details, booking a villa on the water, a private jet, a personal chef, all the best for my only son and his fiancée. The cost was astronomical, but money had long ago ceased to matter to me. More important was the gesture, the demonstration of my willingness to participate in their lives. The last few days I felt better than I had in a long time. It seemed like the ice between Cordell and me had begun to melt. He'd even called a couple times, ostensibly to confirm the details of the honeymoon, but our conversations had gone beyond formalities. He talked about his work, about his new project to digitize the diagnosis of rare diseases. It was the first time I had listened without criticizing, and it seemed to open some kind of door between us. On Thursday, I was finalizing the last preparations for their trip when I got a call from my financial advisor. Mr. Forsyth, all arrangements with the resort are finalized, Patrick informed me. We just need to confirm the dates and names of the guests to book the tickets. Fine, I replied. Book the 11th through the 21st. The names are Cordell Forsyth and Celeste Murphy Forsyth. Will do, Patrick replied. By the way, congratulations on your son's upcoming wedding. You must be very proud. Yes, thank you. I felt a surge of pride. It's going to be a beautiful event. I'm sure it will be. Weddings are always so exciting. Have you bought your tuxedo yet? He asked casually. I beg your pardon? For the wedding? Or are you planning on wearing the one you wore to the fundraiser last year? It was gorgeous. I froze. Something wasn't adding up. Patrick, what are you talking about? What tuxedo? For your son's wedding, he repeated, and there was uncertainty in his voice. Didn't you? Oh, I think I said something wrong. An icy lump began to form in my stomach. Patrick, I said slowly, Did you get an invitation to Cordell's wedding? Silence, then, yes, Mr. Forsyth. Last week. I thought you knew. I assumed. Thank you, Patrick, I interrupted him. Finish making the reservations. I'll get back to you later. I hung up the phone and sat still for a while, trying to make sense of the situation. My financial advisor had gotten an invitation to my son's wedding. I hadn't. At first I thought it was some kind of mistake. Maybe my invitation got lost in the mail, or maybe they were planning to give it to me in person, during some special moment. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the case. This was a deliberate exception. Feeling the anger rising in me in a hot wave, I grabbed my phone and dialed Cordell's number. He answered after the third ring. Dad? Is something wrong? Patrick Dolan got an invitation to your wedding, I said without preamble. Silence, then a deep sigh. I've been meaning to talk to you about it. When? I interrupted. The day before the ceremony? Or maybe during the honeymoon I paid for? Look, it's complicated. What's complicated, Cordell? Inviting your own father to your wedding? I realize we haven't always gotten along, but this... I couldn't find the words to describe how I felt. Betrayal? Humiliation? Pain? Dad, Cordell's voice sounded tired. Celeste and I want our wedding to be a happy, peaceful day. No drama, no tension, no. Without me, I finished for him. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Explain to me why my financial advisor, who only knows you through my stories, is invited to your wedding and I'm not? Because he won't criticize every decision we make. Cordell raised his voice. Because he won't remind everyone how much he's done for me. Because he won't have to tiptoe around me, afraid to say or do the wrong thing. His words hit me like a slap in the face. Is that really how he sees me? As a tyrant to be feared? As a weight to be rid of? I'm your father, I said quietly. The only parent you have left. I know, he said more calmly. And I appreciate everything you've done for me. I do. But this is our day with Celeste. We want it to be perfect. And my presence will make it less than perfect? Daddy, please understand. No, Cordell, you understand. I could feel my voice starting to tremble. You're my only son. You're the only thing I have left in this life. I want to be a part of your happiness. But you won't be happy for us, he exclaimed. You will look for faults, criticize, control. You've already started with this honeymoon, insisting on your choices, your terms. Everything always has to be your way. I just wanted to help, to give you a gift. No, Dad, you wanted to show me that you still control my life, that without you and your money, I'm nothing. His words struck a nerve. Isn't that what I've been telling him all these years? That without my support, my guidance, my money, he couldn't survive in this world? And now he's rejecting me for it. That's not true, I said, but my denial sounded unconvincing, even to myself. Dad, I appreciate the gift. I really do. Cordell's voice softened. A honeymoon is very generous, but we want to have our wedding our own way, without your presence. Say it, I demanded, feeling something break inside me. Tell me straight out that you don't want me at your wedding. A pause. Then, Dad, you'll spoil our celebration. Don't come. His words hung between us like a poisonous cloud. I couldn't believe that my own son could say such a thing to me. The son I had raised, cared for, built an empire for. Okay, I said finally, and my voice sounded strangely calm. I understand you, loud and clear. Dad. No, it's okay, I interrupted him. It's your wedding, your decision. I respect that. I hung up without waiting for his answer. I sat in my office, staring into the void as the sun slowly dipped below the horizon, painting Elliott Bay red. Scraps of memories flashed through my mind. Cordell, the baby in my arms, his first steps, the first day of school, graduation. Where did we take a wrong turn? When did the estrangement become insurmountable? After a few hours of reflection, I made a decision. Perhaps impulsive, perhaps petty, but the only thing that could do anything to calm the storm inside me. I called Patrick. Cancel the reservation in the Maldives, I said. Everything. The villa, the flight, everything. Mr. Forsyth? Patrick sounded surprised. Are you sure? The deposits have already been made, and they're non-refundable. I said cancel it, I repeated, and put the money that was intended for this trip into my personal investment portfolio. Whatever you say, sir. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange satisfaction. Yes, it was a petty, vindictive act, unworthy of a man of my position and age, but it was also a necessary statement. I would no longer allow my son to use my money while rejecting myself. I pulled out a bottle of whiskey and poured myself a double shot. Evelyn would never approve of my decision. She was a peacemaker, always looking for compromises, for ways to reconcile. But Evelyn wasn't around. It was just me and my anger, my resentment, my pride. The next morning I was awakened by the doorbell. The clock read 9:30 late for me, usually up at dawn. But last night I'd been awake for a long time, trying to dull the pain with whiskey and old movies. I opened the door without even looking through the peephole and saw Cordell standing in front of me. He looked tired, like he'd been up all night too. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped back silently, letting him in. We walked into the living room, and he sat across from me, hunched over with his hands between his knees, a posture I remembered from his teenage years when he was preparing for a difficult conversation. "I got a call from the resort manager in the Maldives," he began without preamble. "They said our reservation was canceled." I nodded without saying a word. "Why, Dad?" His voice sounded tired, not angry, which surprised me. "Why did you do it? Why did you take me off the guest list for the wedding?" I answered a question with a question. He ran his hand over his face. "I already explained yesterday." "Yes, you were very clear," I interrupted him. "I'll spoil your party with my presence." Those were your exact words. "I shouldn't have said that," he admitted. "I was upset. But the point remains the same. Celeste and I want our wedding to be peaceful and joyful. No drama. And I'm the drama, right?" "Daddy, please." "No, Cordell." I raised my hand to stop him. "Let's be honest with each other. You don't want me at your wedding. That's your right. But then I don't have to pay for your honeymoon either. It's my money, my choice. So you're punishing us for wanting a stress-free wedding?" "I'm not punishing you. I just don't see any reason to spend a six-figure sum on people who can't even invite me to their celebration." He shook his head as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "And you wonder why I don't want you there? You turn everything into a deal, a transaction. Everything has a price, even your love." His words hit me harder than I expected, because they were true. I really did see the world in terms of exchange, costs, and benefits. Even my relationship with my own son. "Love is a two-way street," I said quietly. "I can't give all the time without getting something in return." "Not even respect? Not even gratitude?" he asked bitterly. "Is taking me off the guest list a sign of respect?" We stared at each other across the living room space separating us, both wounded, both too proud to take the first step toward reconciliation. "I'm sorry it came to this," Cordell finally said. "I really am." Something in his tone made me soften. Maybe it was the genuine sadness I heard, or the way he reminded me of Evelyn in that moment, the same eyes, the same tilt of his head. "Me too," I admitted. "I wanted to be a part of your special day, to share in your joy." "I know," he nodded, "and I'm really sorry I can't give you that." We fell silent again, and the silence between us seemed a little less tense than before. "Listen," I began. "I'm going to make you an offer. One last one." He looked up at me, wary but interested. "I'll reinstate the reservation in the Maldives. Everything is planned. But in exchange, I want to be invited to the wedding. Not as a guest of honor, not to give a speech or walk you down the aisle, just as one of the guests, to sit quietly in the corner and watch my only son get married." Cordell hesitated, and I could see the different emotions struggling in his eyes. The desire for a paid honeymoon, the reluctance to see me at the wedding, maybe some guilt. "Yeah, I need to discuss this with Celeste," he said finally. "Of course," I nodded. "I understand. But I need an answer today. The reservation needs to be either permanently canceled or reinstated as soon as possible." "I'll call you back," he said, getting up. I walked him to the door. When he was already on the doorstep, I couldn't help but ask, "Is it because of Celeste? She doesn't want me there?" Cordell turned, a look of weariness on his face. "No, Dad. It's my decision. Just mine." With those words, he walked away, leaving me alone in the empty house with my thoughts. All day long, I couldn't find a place to go, waiting for him to call. I checked my phone every few minutes. Even though I knew I couldn't have missed the call, the volume was set to maximum. I tried to distract myself with work, reading, even started watching a documentary about World War II, but nothing could keep my attention. The call came at 5 in the evening. I took a deep breath before answering, preparing for any outcome. "Yes, Cordell." "We agree," he said without preamble. "You'll get an invitation to the wedding. But Daddy, please don't make trouble. No scenes, no arguments, no disapproving looks. I'll be a model guest," I promised. "You won't even notice my presence." "Good," his voice sounded strained. "Then we have a deal." "Yes, we have a deal," I confirmed. "I'll contact Patrick and get the reservation reinstated." After we said goodbye, I sat back in my chair, feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. I'd made it. I'd be at my son's wedding. But at what cost? Manipulation? Threats? Almost blackmail. It wasn't how I'd envisioned repairing my relationship with Cordell. But I had no choice. Sometimes you have to use the tools you have. And money had always been my most reliable tool. I dialed Patrick's number. "Reinstate the reservation in the Maldives," I ordered. "Just the way it was." "Will do, Mr. Forsyth," he replied. "May I ask what's changed?" "I've received an invitation to the wedding," I said, and I could hear the bitterness in my voice. "Congratulations, sir," Patrick said after a brief pause. "I'm sure it will be a wonderful occasion." "Yes," I replied. "Beautiful." I hung up the phone and went to the bar and poured myself a whiskey. To successful negotiations, I thought ironically. Here's to buying a seat at my own son's wedding. Evelyn would have been horrified. But Evelyn is gone, and I'm doing what I have to do to stay in our son's life, even if it means being the person I don't want to be. My son's wedding day was surprisingly clear for Seattle. No rain, no fog, just a few clouds and a blue sky. It was as if nature itself had decided to give the newlyweds a gift. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, adjusting my bow tie. The tuxedo fit perfectly. My tailor always did a perfect job. But the man in the reflection looked old and tired. 73 years old. When did I get so old? When my hair turned completely gray and my face was covered with a network of wrinkles. I sighed and turned away from the mirror. This is no time for existential crises. Today is the day I have to play my role. The role of the satisfied, proud father of the groom. Even if my presence was forced, bought at the cost of a luxurious honeymoon. The Ravenna Country Club greeted me with manicured lawns and elegant floral arrangements. I arrived an hour before the ceremony, an old habit of always being earlier than the appointed time. Most of the guests hadn't arrived yet, giving me a chance to look around and gather my thoughts. The wedding coordinator, a young woman with a clipboard and headset, met me at the entrance. "Mr. Forsyth," she exclaimed with a professional smile, "we're so glad you got here early. Cordell mentioned that you might want to see how everything is organized." "Cordell said that?" "I doubt it. He probably told her to keep an eye on me so I wouldn't cause trouble." "Yeah, that would be nice," I replied with a polite smile. She walked me around the grounds, showing me where the ceremony would be held, on the outdoor lawn overlooking Lake Washington, where the reception would be held, in the club's banquet room, decorated in neutral colors with accents of blue and silver. Everything was elegant, tasteful, no frills. Not at all like the lavish wedding I would have organized if my opinion had been taken into account. But no one asked for my opinion, and frankly, I wasn't sure my taste could be trusted in such matters. Evelyn had always been the one in charge of aesthetics in our family. "Here will be your seat." The coordinator pointed to a table in the corner of the banquet hall, close enough to the main table that it didn't look offensive, but also far enough away to minimize my contact with the bride and groom. At the same table as Celeste's family. "Fine," I nodded, though I felt a prick of resentment inside. The groom's father usually sat at the head table, but obviously in this case, tradition had been sacrificed for the comfort of the newlyweds. As the guests began to arrive, I stood back watching. Some I knew, business associates, a few old family friends, Patrick, my financial advisor. Most were unfamiliar to me. Cordell and Celeste's co-workers, their friends, her family. I nodded and smiled as I met someone's gaze, but didn't approach first. I wondered as I was introduced to the guests. The father of the groom who wasn't originally invited? The rich old man who is tolerated for his money? Stay away from him. He's a spoilsport. The ceremony began exactly at the appointed time, 1600. Celeste was beautiful in her simple but elegant dress. Cordell looked happy and a little nervous. I watched them from my seat in the third row, feeling a strange mixture of pride and alienation. My son is getting married, starting a new chapter of his life, and I'm just a spectator, not a participant. The vows were touching, heartfelt. Celeste talked about how Cordell taught her to believe in herself, supported her career ambitions, and became her best friend and associate. Cordell talked about her strength, her intelligence, how she had changed his life for the better. None of them mentioned me, and that was predictable, but it still hurt. After the ceremony, the reception began. I went through the congratulations line, enduring formal hugs with my son and daughter-in-law, and then made my way to my table. Seated next to me were Celeste's parents, simple middle-income people from Arizona. Her father worked as a supermarket manager, her mother as a school secretary. Nice, unassuming people, clearly proud of their daughter and a little overwhelmed by the luxury of the wedding. "You must be very proud of Cordell," Mrs. Murphy said to me during dinner. "Such a successful young man." "Yes," I replied. "He's accomplished a lot. And they are so well suited to each other," she continued. "Our Celeste has always been ambitious. And now with a husband like that, well, all doors are open to them." Something in her tone made me wary. Was there a hint of a financial component to the marriage? Or was I just becoming a suspicious old man, seeing calculation where there wasn't any? Dinner changed to dancing. I watched the newlyweds' first dance, Celeste dancing with her father. Traditionally, there was supposed to be a mother-son dance, but since Evelyn wasn't with us, that part was skipped. Another reminder of the emptiness her death left. During the entire event, I tried to stay out of the way, keeping my promise not to cause trouble, talked politely to those who approached me, but didn't seek contact myself. I drank just enough not to look sober, but not enough for my tongue to begin to loosen. I remembered Evelyn's advice. Keep your thoughts to yourself at weddings and funerals, Hayden. No one wants to hear the truth on those days. About halfway through the evening, I felt tired. All this pretending that I was happy to be here, that I approved of this marriage, that I didn't feel rejected by my own son, was wearing me out. I decided to go out on the terrace to get a breath of fresh air and be alone for a while. The evening air was cool and fresh. I inhaled deeply, feeling the tension release a little. In the distance, I could see the lights of Seattle reflecting in the dark waters of the lake. A beautiful view, a serene moment, which was interrupted by the sound of a door opening. I turned around and saw Celeste and some woman I didn't know, probably a friend of the bride, coming out onto the terrace. They hadn't noticed me. I was standing in the shadows in the corner of the terrace, and they had stopped at the railing on the other side, with their backs to me. My first impulse was to make my presence known, but something stopped me. Maybe the tone of their conversation, quiet, conspiratorial, not meant for other people's ears. "I can't believe you did this," the unknown woman said. "Marrying a guy you've only been dating for a year. When you know it's the one, why wait?" Celeste replied, and there was a note in her voice I'd never heard before, a cold, calculating tone. "And it has nothing to do with the fact that his father is a multimillionaire?" I could hear the teasing in my friend's voice. Celeste laughed softly. "Well, it's certainly a bonus. But Cordell's making good money himself. His startup's on the verge of a breakthrough, he says. And if the old man plays in the box in the next few years," she paused, "what Cordell gets will solve all our financial problems for the rest of our lives." I froze, not believing my ears. Was she really talking about my death so casual? Like a business plan? "Is that a possibility?" my friend asked with a hint of curiosity. "I mean, he looks pretty healthy for his age." "He's 73, and he's had 2 heart attacks in the last 5 years, Celeste replied. "Cordell says his doctors aren't optimistic about his long-term prognosis." "Heart attacks?" "I had mild angina, not seizures." "And who are these doctors Cordell's talking about?" I only see one cardiologist and his prognosis is quite favorable for my age. And Cordell, is he okay with that approach? Her friend asked, and there was a slight disapproval in her voice. I mean, it's his father after all. They have a complicated relationship. Celeste shrugged. The old man had been a tyrant his whole life, used the money to control Cordell's every decision. Did you see the drama he caused with that wedding? Refused to pay for the honeymoon unless we invited him. Wow, she said. That sounds awful. It is. Celeste nodded. Cordell had been seeing a therapist for years to deal with the trauma of being a father like that. He deserves that inheritance after all he's been through. Is there a guarantee he'll get it? My friend asked. I mean, the father could change his will. Celeste smiled, and even in the darkness of the terrace, I could see that the smile didn't touch her eyes. So we have to be smarter. Show him that we finally accept him, that we're ready to include him in our lives. The old man is lonely, Jen, desperate for attention and love. That's our leverage. And the plan is to let him think he's still in control, Celeste finished. Let him fund our lifestyle while he's still here. And when he's gone, well then, we'll have it all at once. I felt nausea rising in my throat, not from the fact that they were counting on my inheritance. I'd always assumed money was part of Cordell's attraction to any woman, but from the cold calculation with which they discussed my death, from the obvious manipulation, from the fact that my own son was obviously in favor of the plan. What about that honeymoon? My friend asked. You said he canceled it and reinstated it when we agreed to invite him to the wedding? Celeste smirked. 10 days in the Maldives in a private villa on the water, full luxury. I checked that package cost about 50 grand, and that's just the beginning. We plan to make up with him after the wedding, start visiting him regularly, maybe even offer to move in with us when his health starts to fail. Keep him close, and keep a finger on the pulse of his finances. That's pretty calculated, she said, and for the first time she sounded a note of disapproval. It's business, Jen, Celeste shrugged. Cordell had spent 30 years listening to reproach and scrutiny. Now it was time to be compensated. At that moment, I accidentally caught the glass on the railing next to me. It fell and shattered, causing both women to turn around sharply. Who's there? Celeste asked sharply. I stepped out of the shadows, trying to keep a neutral expression on my face, though I was seething inside. I apologize for the intrusion, I said calmly. I was just getting some fresh air. Celeste turned visibly pale but quickly pulled herself together. Mr. Forsyth, she said with a strained smile, how long have you been standing here? I just stepped out, I lied. I accidentally touched my glass. I hope I'm not interrupting your conversation. No, she answered quickly. Jennifer and I were just talking about organizing the wedding. There's so much to consider, you know. Oh, I'm sure there is, I nodded, especially when you plan far in advance. Our gazes met, and for a moment there was concern in her eyes. She wasn't sure if I'd heard their conversation, and I wasn't about to dispel her doubts. Well, I'll leave you to it, I said, heading for the door. I'll go congratulate my son again. When I got back to the lounge, Cordell was talking to a group of his co-workers at the bar. I approached them, smiling politely. The conversation broke up and everyone looked at me with some wariness. Apparently my son had warned them about their complicated relationship with me. Cordell, can I talk to you for a minute? I asked. Sure, Dad. He apologized to his friends and stepped aside with me. Is something wrong? Nothing's wrong, I assured him. I just wanted to congratulate you again. Celeste is an amazing woman. Very calculating. He frowned, catching the unusual tone in my voice. What do you mean? Nothing in particular, I smiled. I just noticed that she's good at planning for the future. Your future together. Mine too, apparently. He tensed, and I saw a flicker of worry in his eyes. Dad, if you heard something... I didn't hear anything, I interrupted him. Just thinking out loud. After all, it's not every day your only son gets married. Cordell looked uncertain, not knowing whether to believe me or not. I kept a polite smile, not giving away my true thoughts. Enjoy your day, son, I said, patting him on the shoulder. And the honeymoon. I'm sure it will be an unforgettable trip. With those words, I left him standing there with a puzzled expression on his face and headed for the exit. I no longer had the energy to pretend to be a happy guest at this feast of hypocrisy. On the way home, I reflected on what I had heard. So this is how my son sees me. A tyrant who needs to be gotten rid of, but with as much money as possible. A man whose death will be a liberation and a financial salvation, a source of trauma that needs therapy. And his wife, this cold, calculating woman, only fueled these notions, obviously having her own plans for my fortune. Well, they miscalculated, thinking I was too old or too lonely to understand their game. And they don't know who they're messing with yet. I didn't build a business empire by being naive or sentimental. If they want to play that game, I'll show them how it's done for real. Perhaps it's time to revisit my will. And not just my will, but my entire strategy in dealing with my son and his new wife. They want to pretend to be loving, caring relatives. That's fine. I'll play along. But behind the scenes, I'll be preparing my own plan. After all, as Celeste said, this is a business. And in this business, I'm a much more experienced player than they realize. The morning after the wedding, I woke up with a clear head and a firm decision. The conversation I overheard between Celeste and her friend never left my mind. Every word, every intonation, the cold calculation in her voice, it all spun around in my head like a broken record. The old man's going to play the box. His doctors aren't particularly optimistic. We'll get it all at once. I stared at the gray Seattle sky outside my bedroom window and realized that I had become a pawn in their game. Worse, I was almost ready to accept that role. I almost believed I could repair my relationship with my son if I obediently opened my wallet and asked no questions. But now I saw the truth. Cordell and Celeste didn't view me as a family member, but as a walking ATM with an expiration date. I got out of bed feeling cold determination replaced the pain and resentment. I took a shower, dressed carefully, as if preparing for an important negotiation. In a way, it was. I was about to begin the most important game of my life, a game in which my dignity and my legacy were on the line. The first thing I did was call Robert Livingston, my lawyer and confidant for the past 30 years. He was not just a lawyer, but a friend, as far as that is possible in the business world. "Robert, I need to change my will right away," I said without preamble when he picked up the phone. "Good morning, Hayden," he answered with his usual nonchalance. "Did something serious happen?" "Let's just say that yesterday at the wedding, I received certain information that made me reconsider my asset allocation." There was a pause. Robert was too smart to ask unnecessary questions over the phone. "I can come to your place this afternoon," he said finally. "Would 14:30 be okay?" "Perfect." The next call was to Patrick, my financial advisor. The conversation with him was more detailed. I asked him to prepare a full report on all my assets and investments, with a special emphasis on those that Cordell might know about. Patrick, unlike Robert, couldn't hide his curiosity. "Hayden, is everything okay? The wedding didn't go as expected?" "It went exactly as it was supposed to," I answered dryly. "It was just time to get my affairs in order." After those calls, I felt hungry. Strangely enough, after yesterday's shock, my appetite hadn't disappeared, but had increased. I went down to the kitchen and made myself a full breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, fruit salad. I ate slowly, thinking over every step of my plan. At 14:30, Robert appeared on my doorstep, precise as always. He brought with him a briefcase full of papers and a wary expression on his face. "So," he said as we settled into my office, "what exactly do you want to change in the will?" I stared at him for a few seconds, collecting my thoughts. "Everything," I finally answered. "I want to exclude Cordell from inheritance." Robert didn't look surprised. In the decades we'd worked together, he'd seen a lot of strange decisions by wealthy clients. "Hayden, do you realize the gravity of this move? Cordell is your only child." "More than I realize," I nodded. "And believe me, I have good reasons. I won't go into details, but I overheard a conversation that made it clear that my son and his new wife were discussing my imminent departure and their future enrichment from my fortune." Robert pressed his lips together, but made no comment. Instead, he opened his briefcase and pulled out some documents. "Okay, how do you want to distribute your estate?" This question caught me off guard. I was so focused on disinheriting Cordell that I hadn't thought about who exactly my assets should go to. "Do you have any idea?" I asked. Usually in these cases, clients choose charities, academic institutions, or set up trusts for specific purposes, Robert replied. I wondered. Evelyn had always been concerned about charities in our family. She supported several organizations involved in cancer research and helping disadvantaged children. After her death, I continued to make regular donations out of inertia, but never put my heart into it. Set up a trust fund, I decided. Half the funds for cancer research, as a tribute to Evelyn's memory. A quarter for educational programs for talented children from poor families. And a quarter, I paused, leave a quarter unallocated. I'll see what I can use it for. Robert wrote down my wishes. And personal property, house, collections, art, sell the house, put the money in a trust, art and collections to appropriate museums. A few of Evelyn's personal effects, I thought again. I'd like to give them to her sister Victoria. We spent the next 2 hours discussing the details of the new will. Robert asked clarifying questions and I answered, occasionally bringing up some assets or liabilities that needed to be included. By the time we finished, it was beginning to get dark. I'll have the documents ready by the end of the week, Robert said, gathering the papers back into his briefcase. You'll need to sign them in front of a notary. Okay, I nodded. And Robert, I want this to remain strictly between us. No entries in the public registers, no hints to Cordell or anyone else. He looked at me with professional seriousness. Of course, Hayden, client confidentiality is sacred to me. But let me give you some advice. Not as a lawyer, but as a friend. Think again before you make a final decision. Family ties, already broken, I interrupted him, and not by me. After Robert left, I poured myself a whiskey and went out onto the terrace. Seattle stretched out before me in the evening, the lights twinkling in the coming twilight. I thought about my life, about the decisions that had brought me to this moment. Had I been a good father? Not by standards. I was demanding, often absent, focused on business more than family. But I always believed I was acting in Cordell's best interest, that I was creating a future for him, providing safety and opportunity. Maybe that was the problem. I never asked him what he wanted. I assumed I knew better, and maybe made him feel like he wasn't good enough, not smart enough, not strong enough to make his own decisions. But did that mean he had the right to plan my inheritance while I was still alive? To use me as an ATM machine, pretending to be a loving son? No. This was where I drew the line. The next morning, Cordell and Celeste flew off on their honeymoon to the Maldives. I didn't see them off at the airport, didn't call to wish them a happy trip. They sent a formal message thanking me for the generous gift and promising to share photos upon their return. I replied with an equally formal, "Have a safe trip," and that was the end of our communication. I used the 10 days of their absence to put in order not only my will, but my entire life. Met with Patrick to review my investment strategy. Visited the doctor for a complete checkup, not because I was concerned about my health, but to have up-to-date information to refute Cordell's words about my imminent departure. As I expected, I was in great shape for my age. You'll live another 20 years, Hayden, if you don't quit exercising, Dr. Burns, my cardiologist, assured me. 20 years. That was more than enough for my plan. I also met with the board of directors of the Cancer Research Foundation that Evelyn had founded. I discussed with them the possibilities of expanding the program and new avenues of research. For the first time in a long time, I felt I was doing something truly important, something that went beyond my personal interests. I signed the new will 5 days after the wedding in the presence of a notary and 2 witnesses, Robert and his assistant. The document was placed in a safe in Robert's office, and a copy in my personal safe at home. Now, if anything happened to me, Cordell wouldn't get a dime. But that was just the beginning of my plan. I didn't want to just exclude my son from the will and wait for a reaction after my death. I wanted him to realize the consequences of his actions while I was alive, to realize that I'm not a helpless old man to be manipulated, that there is a price to pay for every action. In the remaining days before their return, I devised a strategy that would be worthy of my best business plans. I explored every possible vulnerability Cordell had. Financial, professional, personal. I found out how serious his claims of a breakthrough in his startup were. Turns out, not very. The company was indeed developing an interesting medical app, but it was still a long way from mass adoption and serious revenue. I also researched Celeste's career. As a sports analyst, she was competent but not outstanding. Her career growth in recent years had been impressive, But judging from some articles and comments in industry forums, not everyone thought it was solely the result of her professional credentials. Hints of the right connections and the right acquaintances occasionally surfaced in discussions. The most interesting revelation was that Celeste had been married before, a short-lived marriage to one Rowan Bishop, a rather wealthy owner of a chain of sports stores. The marriage lasted only 2 years and ended in divorce, after which her career took a sharp upward turn. Did Cordell know about this? I wasn't sure, but it was information worth saving for the right time. The more I learned, the clearer my plan became. I wasn't going to retaliate in the primitive sense of making a public scandal or ruining their lives. No, my revenge was going to be more subtle. I wanted them to get exactly what they craved: my attention, my care, my involvement in their lives. But on my terms, I decided to play the role they had prepared for me. The role of the lonely, attention-hungry old man willing to splurge for love. I will be generous. I will take an interest in their lives. I will offer help and advice. But each step will be part of a carefully thought-out plan. Each gift, with invisible strings, each manifestation of weakness, a trap. And gradually, step by step, I will lead them to a place where they will have to face the consequences of their manipulations. Where they will have to admit that they didn't just cheat the old man, they cheated the man who built an empire on the ability to calculate moves ahead of time. The day they returned from their honeymoon, I was ready to start the game. I sent them a message offering to stop by my place whenever convenient to hear about the trip and show them something interesting. Knowing their plan to make up with me, I was sure they wouldn't delay the visit. And indeed, the day after their arrival, they showed up on my doorstep, tanned, rested, with strained smiles and fake enthusiasm. Cordell brought a bottle of expensive wine, Celeste some local souvenir from the Maldives. "Daddy, we missed you," Cordell exclaimed, hugging me with unexpected warmth. "We have so much to tell you." I smiled, looking him straight in the eye. "I've missed you too, son, and I have so much to tell you too." Concern flashed in their gazes, quickly hidden behind their smiles. They didn't know I'd heard their plans. They didn't know the will had already been changed. They didn't know that a new game had begun in which I controlled every move. I led them into the living room where the table was set for tea. Everything looked immaculate: the silver service Evelyn loved, the expensive china, the homemade pastries, the image of a caring, single father, eager for attention and willing to pay any price for it. "Make yourself comfortable," I said with a smile. "I'm so glad you're here. I had an idea during your absence, an idea that I think could change our lives for the better." They looked at each other, and I saw in their eyes what I expected: a mixture of greed and wariness. They thought they were in control, that I was just a pawn in their game. But in fact, the game was just beginning, and I was the one who was setting the pieces. The next few weeks after Cordell and Celeste returned from their honeymoon brought a strange change to my sedate life. Suddenly, I was the center of their attention. They called almost every day, visited at least twice a week, and were constantly inviting me to dinners, trade shows, even sporting events that Celeste told me about. At first, I played the role they expected, that of a grateful, lonely old man touched by the sudden attention. I accepted their invitations, smiled at their jokes, pretended not to notice the falseness in their voices, watched their performance like a front-row spectator. With each visit, the caring became more and more intrusive. Celeste brought home-cooked meals, claiming I needed to eat right at my age. Cordell began to take an interest in my health, suggesting excellent specialists and new treatments. Even though I wasn't complaining of any problems, they even struck up a conversation about my house being too big for one person and offered to help find something smaller and more comfortable. "Dad, Celeste and I were thinking," Cordell began during one of the visits, "maybe you should move closer to us. There are some great condos in our neighborhood for people your age, with all the amenities, medical staff, and you could sell that huge house," Celeste said enthusiastically. "It must be worth a fortune. Imagine how many wonderful trips you could take with that money." I smiled, sipping tea from my cup. "That's very thoughtful of you," I replied, "but I'm not ready to part with the house I've lived in for 30 years. There are too many memories." "But Dad," Cordell insisted, "you're all alone here. What if something happens? Who's going to help? I have a housekeeper who comes 3 times a week and a gardener. I think they'd notice if I fell down the stairs. I grinned, but I saw Celeste's eyes widen slightly at the word, fall down the stairs. We'd be happier if you lived closer anyway, she said, quickly regaining her composure. We could see each other more often, help around the house. Watching my every move and transaction, I thought, but I said aloud, I'll think about your proposal. It's a serious decision. It can't be made spontaneously. They exchanged glances, disappointed, but not surprised. They had expected resistance. Their plan was probably a gradual pressure, a gentle nudge toward a decision they considered favorable to themselves. Celeste was especially diligent. She started bringing me articles on healthy living, organic foods, vitamin supplements. She asked me about my habits, my daily regimen, my medications. One day she even offered to clean up my financial records because she noticed some clutter on my desk. I used to work as an accounting assistant in college, she said with a smile. I can help structure your bills, payments. No need to worry, I replied. Patrick has been doing a great job with all my finances for 20 years. Mentioning Patrick always made her faintly irritated. She couldn't understand why I trusted an outsider more than family. But I saw right through her. She wanted access to my accounts, to information about my assets. She wanted to know exactly what to count on in her plans for compensation, as she put it in a conversation with a friend at the wedding. After 2 months of this spectacle, I decided it was time to end the game. They got more and more persistent, especially after Cordell accidentally heard from a mutual acquaintance that I supposedly wasn't feeling well at an event. Pure fiction. I didn't attend any events at the time. I invited them to dinner at my house. Not just any dinner, a special evening. I told them I wanted to discuss something important about our future together. Celeste was thrilled. Cordell was intrigued. They must have thought the moment had arrived. The old man was ready to discuss moving, perhaps even putting some of his assets under their careful management. I prepared thoroughly. I ordered dinner from their favorite restaurant, opened a bottle of excellent wine from the vintage of Cordell's birth year, and created the atmosphere of a family celebration. When they arrived, I greeted them with the hospitality of a perfect host, escorted them to the dining room, where everything was already set. It looks beautiful, Dad, Cordell said, looking around the table. Any special occasion? You could say that, I nodded, pouring the wine. I've been thinking about a lot of things these past weeks. Your concern has touched me to the core. Celeste glowed. We just want you to be happy, Hayden. And safe, Cordell added. At your age, living alone. Yeah, you've said that many times, I smiled. That's why I invited you here today, to discuss my future. They straightened up like hounds on the prowl. Their eyes lit up with anticipation. We're listening, Cordell said with contrived nonchalance. I took a sip of wine, savoring the moment. The last few months had made me think about a lot of things. About what was really important, about family, about trust. They nodded, encouraging me to continue. And I've come to certain conclusions, I said, looking each of them in the eye in turn. First, I've decided to change my will. Celeste almost choked on her wine. Really? She asked, trying to hide her impatience. What changes did you make? Cardinal changes, I answered with a smile. I've eliminated Cordell as heir. There was a heavy silence. I watched their faces change slowly, from shock to incomprehension, then to trying to hide their panic. What? Cordell finally squeezed out. But why? The old man will play the box in the next few years. What Cordell gets will solve all our financial problems for the rest of our lives, I quoted, watching the blood drain from Celeste's face. We have to be smarter than that. Show him that we finally accept him, that we're ready to include him in our lives. Sound familiar? Celeste turned completely pale. I don't know what you mean. Please, I interrupted her with a gesture. Let's not make things worse by lying. I heard your conversation with your friend at the wedding. Every word. Cordell looked confused. What conversation? He asked, shifting his gaze between me and his wife. Celeste, what's he talking about? Oh, you don't know? I acted surprised. Your wife was discussing with her friend how you plan to use my fortune after I die, how I've controlled you your whole life, and now it's time to get compensation. How you've been seeing a therapist for years because of the trauma of my paternity. and how you're going to keep me close and keep a finger on the pulse of my finances. Cordell looked like I punched him. Dad, there's some kind of misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. I shook my head. I heard everything, and I understood everything. That's why the day after your wedding, I changed my will. My entire estate will go to a trust that will fund cancer research, educational programs, and other charitable initiatives. Neither you nor your wife will receive a dime. Celeste finally found her voice. Hayden, you misinterpreted. I'm a financier, Celeste, I interrupted her. I've built a business on interpreting information correctly. And believe me, there's no room for ambiguity. I turned to Cordell, who still looked stunned. You know, son, I always thought our problems were the result of my mistakes. That I was too demanding, too controlling, not attentive enough. I was willing to admit those mistakes, fix them. But it turns out that's not the point. It's that you don't see me as a father. You see me as an ATM machine, a source of funding for your life. That's not true, Cordell exclaimed, but I could see the guilt in his eyes. Then why didn't you stop your wife when she made plans for my inheritance? Why let her talk about my death as a business opportunity? Why did you lie to her about my health, telling her I'd had 2 heart attacks and the doctors were not particularly optimistic? Cordell glanced at Celeste, who now looked not just pale, but downright sick. Hayden, we've never... That's enough, I held up my hand. I don't want to hear any more lies. I've asked you here today to tell you a few things. First, my will has already been amended and probated. Second, I'm in perfect health, and my cardiologist predicts at least 15 to 20 more years of life, if not more. And third, I paused, I don't want you in my house or my life anymore. Cordell jumped up from his seat. Dad, you can't just cut us out of your life? I can, I replied calmly, and I already have. Just like you cut me out when you didn't want to invite me to your wedding in the first place. Just like you both cut me out when you saw me not as a person, but as a line item in your future budget. But we're family, he exclaimed. No, Cordell, family isn't just blood ties. Family is respect, caring, honesty. I don't see any of that in our relationship. Celeste, who'd been sitting there like a thunderstorm, suddenly had a second wind. You can't do this, she said, anger in her voice. You can't disinherit Cordell just because you overheard some conversation you misunderstood. I can, I repeated. And I did. And the more you say it, the more confident I become in my decision. I stood up from the table, signaling that the conversation was over. Now please leave my house, and don't come back. Dad, please. Cordell looked almost frightened. Let's talk. Let's talk about this. There's nothing more to talk about. I shook my head. The decision has been made. Final and irrevocable. They left a few minutes later, Celeste furious, Cordell distraught. I stood at the window watching their car drive out the gate and felt a strange mixture of bitterness and relief. Bitterness because no matter what, Cordell was my son, my only child, an extension of me and Evelyn. I loved him, even if I didn't always know how to show it. Breaking up with him meant the end of hope for mending our relationship, for that familial warmth I'd been missing for the past few years. Relief, because I didn't have to pretend anymore. I didn't have to play the role they'd chosen for me. I didn't have to put up with their fake care and self-serving attention. I was free from the toxic relationships that were poisoning my life. Over the next few days, I expected calls, emails, attempts to contact me. But they didn't follow. Apparently, they realized that the game was over, that the manipulation was no longer working. Or perhaps Celeste had convinced Cordell that without the inheritance, I wasn't worth their time and effort. Either way, the silence was a blessing. I was beginning a new chapter of my life. Without the pressure of family expectations and obligations, I could focus on the things that really mattered to me. I became more involved in charitable organizations, especially those related to cancer research. It was a tribute to Evelyn, a way of continuing what was important to her. I also started a project to support young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged neighborhoods in Seattle. Not just funding, mentoring, training, really helping them build sustainable businesses. I used my experience, my knowledge, my connections to give these young people a chance they might otherwise never have gotten. This was something new for me, not just making money, but using it and my skills to make a difference in the world. I found it fulfilling in a way I hadn't experienced even in the most successful years of my career. Of course, there were some lonely evenings, moments when I looked at family photos and wondered where and when things went wrong, moments when I missed the grandchildren I would never see, moments when I was overcome with bitterness at the realization that I was all alone at the end of my life. But then I remembered the words Evelyn once said to me, "It's better to be alone than with people who make you feel lonely." And I realized she was right. My loneliness was now a choice, not the result of manipulation and rejection. There was a freedom in it that I hadn't known before. 6 months after our last conversation, I happened to run into Cordell in town. We were both having lunch at the same restaurant, Ami, and Patrick discussing a new investment strategy for a charitable foundation. Cordell was some man in a business suit, apparently a colleague or partner. Our gazes met across the room. For a moment, something flashed in his eyes. Regret? Anger? I couldn't quite make it out. Then he gave me a slight nod. I returned the favor, and we went back to our conversations, as if we were just acquaintances who happened to meet in a public place. It was a strange feeling, seeing my only son and realizing that he had become a stranger to me. But it was also a kind of acceptance of a reality I had refused to see for too long. That evening, I sat down at the desk in my office and began writing a letter, not to Cordell. No, I was writing instructions to Robert, my attorney, regarding the distribution of the remaining quarter of my fortune that I had previously left undistributed. I decided to create a separate fund that would support programs to help disadvantaged children. Children who, like my son, may have felt unheard, misunderstood, unappreciated. Kids who needed not only material support, but reassurance that their voices mattered. Perhaps this was my form of redemption, a way of writing through other children the wrongs I had done to my own son. Or maybe it was just a way to give meaning to the pain and frustration I experienced. Either way, I felt a strange peace in finishing this letter. It was as if I was closing one chapter of my life and opening another. Uncertain, perhaps lonely, but also filled with new meaning and new possibilities. Eventually, at 73, I discovered that life can begin anew, that it is possible to find a new path, even when it feels like all roads have been traveled. That freedom from toxic relationships is not the end, but the beginning of something new. And that was perhaps the most important lesson I've ever learned.